Hi folks, today we are going to talk about English Language Paper 2, Question 2. Now hopefully you've watched the previous videos in this series, so you'll already have read the sources with me and you'll already have a bit of an idea of what we're talking about. If you haven't watched the previous videos or read the sources, go back through the playlist or go to my website amysmithliterature.wordpress.com to the English Language Paper 2 page and check them out. Okay, so question 2 says you need to refer to source A and source B for this question. So we must talk about both sources. Both sources describe journeys to new places. What can you infer about the differences between the methods of travel the writers use on their journeys? And we have 8 marks for this question. We'll talk about inference or infer in a minute, and I'll explain what that means. But notice that we're looking at the differences. Sometimes this question says similarity, so make sure you read the question really carefully. And then the question will also specify a topic, which here is methods of travel. There's 8 marks, so we've got about 8 to 10 minutes to answer this question, so we've got to be speedy. Right, but what does inference or infer actually mean? It tells us to look at the evidence and think, what does it suggest to you? Let's think about an example. So here, something I'm rather familiar with as a teacher, my class don't want to take their coats off in the lesson. So what can I, as the teacher, infer about that behaviour? Well, it's cold. They are uncomfortable. If I push that a little bit further, that's going to tell me that they're not fully relaxed in the classroom, which then, if I push that further, tells me that they will not learn well in my lesson, which then tells me I need to improve the environment to help them learn more effectively. So from my starting point, my evidence might be that the class don't want to take their coats off, and then I've made a series of inferences, a series of suggestions about what that tells me about the situation. Okay, you have a go. Look at this one. The table is set for a birthday party, yet the cake is untouched and the candles have completely burned down. Okay, see if you can come up with 4 inferences from that statement. So stop the video, think it through, start the video again when you're ready. Right, here are my inferences then. So it should be a celebration, but something has gone wrong. Birthday candles last for years. They don't normally get burnt down because you normally blow them out straight away. That tells us the candles have been lit for a long time and they've not been blown out. So perhaps the person whose birthday it is has not turned up, or perhaps something has happened to interrupt the party. Okay, have a go at this one then. So after reading an email, Ms. Patel sighed and looked out of the window. Come up with 4 inferences for this one and start the video again when you're ready. Here are my inferences then. So I'm assuming Ms. Patel is at work, she's reading her emails. She's disappointed or she's distressed at what she's read in the email. Probably the email contains some kind of bad news and Ms. Patel doesn't seem to know what to do. So we've looked at the evidence and we thought, right, what does this suggest? What do we learn from this? So question 2 is asking you to make inferences about the differences between the methods of travel in these sources. So I'm going to start by planning my answer using a quick table, source A and source B, and I'm going to look for the methods of travels. I'm going to get an idea about that, and I'm going to get some quotations to back that. So let's look at source A. Well, the introduction tells us what the method of travel is. It's a horse-drawn carriage. And then we've got a long paragraph that describes what Dickens sees from the window of this carriage. He talks about the blue sea, he talks about how the landscape is gliding slowly on, and then he goes into an awful lot of detail about the plants that he can see from the window of his carriage. So I'm going to put in my table that the horse-drawn carriage moves slowly, allowing Dickens to see everything around him. I'm not going to put in the full quotations, I'm just going to jot down the line numbers, so it's lines 4, 6 and 7. Right, let's look a little bit later in the source to get another idea. And towards the end of the source, Dickens talks about walking instead of being in a carriage. So that's a different method of travel. So I'm going to pick that out, put it in my table, and it says here that Dickens enjoys walking. He's able to appreciate the surroundings. And again, I've just popped the line numbers in for a bit of speed. Right, let's look at source B then. So in source B, the first paragraph is all about getting to Italy, hating the heat, but within this first paragraph, the writer talks about the airport and the flight that she has been on. She says it was a brief and rather comfortable flight in which I saw nothing but slept all the way. So in my table, I'm putting in that the plane is comfortable and quick, and that's from lines 3 and 4. We need another method of travel from this source to finish our table off. So later on in the source, she flags down a cab and she says that the 5-minute drive in the air-conditioned taxi was worth every extravagant euro. So I'm going to put that into my table. The taxi is air-conditioned and more comfortable than walking, and that's lines 17 to 19. Okay, if you need to pause the video and jot down these ideas, that is absolutely fine. Remember that all of the sources and the table to fill in and so on are all available on my website, amysmithliterature.wordpress.com. Go to GCSE English Language Paper 2 and you can download the pack from there so you can follow along with me. So we also need to remember that we need to identify like-for-like comparisons on this. We need to make sure that the ideas are directly connected to each other. So looking at the first row of my table, we're talking about how the horse-drawn carriage moves slowly, whereas the plane moves really quickly. So that's a like-for-like comparison. It's directly related. In my second row of the table, Dickens enjoys walking, appreciates the surroundings, whereas in source B, the taxi is more comfortable than walking. So again, that's a like-for-like comparison. These two things are directly related to each other. Here's an example answer then, and I've highlighted it, but I'll talk to you about that in a minute. We'll read it through first. So it says, whilst in source A, Dickens enjoys using a slow method of transport, in source B, Middleton relishes the speed and comfort of the aeroplane. Dickens describes the landscape as gliding slowly on and is consequently able to describe the cactus and aloe plants in a lot of detail. However, in source B, Middleton went on a brief flight during which she saw nothing because she slept all the way. Whereas Dickens appreciates the landscape and enjoys the journey itself, Middleton sees it as a means to an end and just wants to arrive at her destination. Okay, so in terms of the colours, in blue I've picked out connectives, so you can see that I'm comparing the two sources and using the connective to signal that I'm looking at differences between them. In the yellow, I've got my explanation and my inferences, and then in the green, I've got my evidence to support those ideas. So this is quite a basic answer. It does the job. I identify the differences, I explain the differences between the two sources, and I make some inferences from that. If I wanted to push my answer a little bit further, it would then look something like this. And here in the yellow, what I've highlighted is those higher level inferences. So remember earlier on in this lesson, we looked at some examples where I wanted you to come up with 4 inferences and pushing that inference further and further each time. If we have a look at the first section in yellow, let's just read through it first. So it says we can infer that Dickens enjoys this mode of transport because he is able to see the plants in the landscape close up and in detail. He is fascinated by the differences with his life at home. Dickens does not mention the discomfort of travelling by carriage because he is so entranced with what he sees. And then the second bit in yellow, we can infer that Middleton likes planes as a mode of transport because modern travel is uneventful and easy. For her, convenience and speed is more important than seeing the world around her. Perhaps because in the modern world we have become used to travel and seeing different countries on the media. Middleton seems desensitised to her journey, whereas Dickens relishes it. So particularly in that second section in yellow, you can see that I've gone from suggesting that planes are uneventful and easy to how convenience and speed are more important than seeing the world around her. So I'm taking that inference a step further to access the highest marks for this question. Your final task is to write up your answer. If you have downloaded the booklet that accompanies these videos from my website, you'll see that there are some sentence starters there for you. You can use those if you want to, or you can ignore them and do your own thing if you want as well. Okay, in the next video, I will talk about paper 2, question 3.